because you come from the 18s, the 21s, and you're him, you're the star, you're scoring goals, you step into first team football, it doesn't always work out like that.
Everyone's got mental health, and it's on a spectrum. When you're looking at elite players and elite performers, elite athletes in general, they're not like all of us. They don't think like we do. That's what makes them great.
Just the thought of that is quite powerful as to how individuals, regardless of whether you're a footballer, regardless of role, is to create peace in uncertainty.
Just not being afraid to reach out and seek support, really.
Yvie, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming down and spending a bit of time with us. A fairly new role for you. How are you finding life with the PFA?
Really, really good. Really busy. I'm on week 7. Big change to be in a club, which is where I was before, and a lot to do. But yeah, everyone's been really welcoming, and I'm really enjoying the challenge.
So give us a little bit about your background, because you mentioned there the PFA is a different environment for you, and you come from an elite sporting background yourself.
Yeah, so well, my background is triathlon, my sporting background. I was an age grouper for Great Britain, so it does give me a dual perspective on what players are going through in terms of, for me, as a triathlete, the everyday grind, as it were, training all the time, fear of injury, getting your nutrition right, making sure you have to go to sleep when others are partying and doing the things that they want to do. But then there's obviously the flip side of that. As a psychologist, I recognise that there may be coping mechanisms such as overtraining or I suppose maladaptive coping mechanisms that you use to try and get through things that maybe aren't as helpful, and I can recognise that in players as well when working with them. So that's.
So do you therefore, when you're coming through it, any young person who loves sport and is outgoing and so on, you've obviously been there and achieved to certain heights. Do you think that enables you to cope with the day-to-day pressures better, or are you somewhat less aware when you're in those bubbles of the day-to-day struggles that everybody faces?
Yeah, I think you are more tuned into it, if you like, because you've been there and you know how it feels. But I do think that the more and more I work in sport, and obviously I'm still competing now, not necessarily at the same level, the more you realise that these things are very normal. And I think it's really, really important in sort of roles such as mine, not to over-medicalise normal everyday distress. So it's okay to feel nervous before a game, it's okay to feel anxious, it's okay to feel performance anxiety, those sorts of things, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It's quite normal, and I just think that we've got to a point sometimes where we're labelling that as somebody's got anxiety, somebody's not really performing well, they need to go and see someone medically, when actually they probably just need to go and speak to a sports psychologist, for example.
And you would spend time at Liverpool, of course, especially when, a big thing for me nowadays is academy players.
Yeah.
And academy graduates who their whole life is being a footballer. And their whole life is at school, there's the adulation, everybody wants to be friends with you. Growing up, your parents love the fact that you're potentially going to be a footballer. For many people in those academies, that simply cannot be the case. The percentage of those academy graduates who go on into the professional game is still not a very big number at all.
It's tiny, isn't it? Yeah.
The distress that causes can be astronomical because it's an identity thing.
Yeah.
Is there enough being done? Is there that support there for those people who are being let go, do you feel?
So, just rewind a little bit with regards to the identity piece. So, what happens is generally, obviously, these boys or girls are going into academies at age 6, some of them, and they form an identity very, very early on. Now, the problem with that is they've not explored any other areas of themselves. So we call that identity foreclosure in psychology. And basically what that means is that whenever they are released at whatever point, if they haven't then got those other areas of their life where they can fall back on or say, I'm not just Joe the footballer, for example, that is even more distressing when they leave, because they're not just leaving football, they're leaving losing their sense of self, essentially. Now, obviously, at Liverpool, when I was at Liverpool, we did a lot of work for players who were in transition and players who left, but we had the resources for that. Not a lot of clubs have those resources, and this is where the PFA, I guess, come in. Was we look after the well-being. We are doing the education pieces around understanding different aspects of your identity, understanding how you can develop yourself personally, personal development courses, and various other areas that players can use to understand that actually I'm not just the footballer, there are other parts of my personality that make me me.
And one of the biggest things that we've seen in recent weeks has been Crystal Palace's initiative for their academy players who perhaps aren't going to make it into the game. They're in fact going that one step further, aren't they, with education, with maximising opportunities. That must be a huge step forward for you.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? Because I think we're recognising that players need a dual career, essentially. Something that I suppose in the past hasn't really been thought about. And it is hard for players, actually, because they just want to be a footballer and they can't see themselves as anything else. Unless, in my experience, they've had maybe a big injury when they're younger, or something's happened and they suddenly think, oh, actually, I might not make it. And then you've got the other side of the coin with parents, where parents are really desperate for their son.
It may
or
even be
daughter.
their own dreams that haven't.
Yeah, and they live
come to fruition.
vicariously through their child. And you know, even in cases sometimes where there's players who aren't really sure they want to be a player, but the parent really wants it. So yeah, it's just managing all of those dynamics. And I just think that hearing that clubs are doing a lot more to support players in that respect is brilliant, you know, and it really helps.
Well, it's interesting there you make the point of players sometimes having to take stock, take a step back. One thing that I've been amazed by with the PFA in the past couple of seasons has been your pre-season training camp. And I've had a lot of friends who have been into it, they've come out of it, they've got clubs, contracts off the back of it. How big of a moment is that for them? Because no doubt if your contract's coming to an end, if maybe there isn't that level of interest that perhaps you've seen in recent seasons, perhaps you're coming off the back of a difficult injury, difficult moment.
Yeah.
To have that environment, speaking to people who have been in it, has been absolutely astronomically important for them.
Yeah.
And that environment that you provide gives them that structure and that routine that seems to be craved so much.
Absolutely. You know, the training camp itself is wonderful, and you know, we've got coaches there and lots of people there to support. The wellbeing team, it's a period of 8 weeks. The wellbeing team place themselves there every single day, so there's always somebody from wellbeing there, and they just sort of, I guess, watch the training, be around the lunches and the meals so that they can have informal conversations with the players, and they are all trained counsellors as well. So it means that if they do want a safe space and they do want to go and talk about an issue, there's the skill set there to support them. And what's really nice is that the players who are talking to the wellbeing team will be followed up by the wellbeing team in terms of, you know, where are they now, have they got another contract somewhere else. And it's just nice to have somebody checking in with you and making sure that you're all right. And you know, again, if they have been coming off the back of a big injury, it's making sure that they have got the right coping mechanisms to deal with that. Because we don't build resilience just by having an experience. So there's a difference between coping and resilience. Coping can be maladaptive in many ways. You know, it can be sort of trying to form control over something, maybe through your eating, or it could be a distressing sort of mechanism like using alcohol, drugs, whatever it might be. And we want to teach players that actually there are other mechanisms that you can use to deal with it. And once you've made sense of that situation that you're in, only then can you build resilience. And that's what our team would do, is to work through that with a player to ensure that they are feeling good at the end of it, at that end of that 8 weeks.
I'm going to take that and give you a two-pronged question then. So first and foremost, what are the issues that you and your team are seeing that players are tending to face? And then secondly to that, what are the mechanisms that you encourage to enable them to move forward with those?
Yeah, so in general, I guess those that are in contract, sometimes it can be the first time that they've ever encountered not playing. That is what we get a lot with the under-18s. So
because you come from the 18s, the 21s, and you're the star, you're scoring goals, you step into first team football, it doesn't always work out like that.
No, and in academy football, they've gone all the way through the academy and the guaranteed game time, then all of a sudden they're not. And one of the things we get quite a lot on our wellbeing questionnaire is, my wellbeing suffering because I'm not playing, and again, that does affect identity. I'm a footballer when I'm playing. When I'm not, who am I? And that's really, really difficult for some of them. What I think is really important though is that we recognise that the truths of football are that you will get injured, you will be on the bench at some point, you're not always going to be with your favourite coach, those sorts of things. And we help them to build resilience around that. I used to say, to players, this is the list of truths. Do you still want the job? And they'd be like, yeah.
Of course, I imagine they always do.
Yeah. So then it's just, okay, well, how do we manage that then? How do we manage expectations around that? And you're trying to create players that are capable of playing first team football, essentially. And so there is a fine line between sort of, I guess, almost trying to smooth out all the bumps for them and building resilience. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
A huge part of piecing this series together has actually been normalising that everybody does have these day-to-day issues, whether you are perceived to be a multi-million pound footballer at the very highest level. I know for me, my troubles for me a couple of years ago, I really struggled, and I have no shame in going to admit that I go to therapy once a month, and I think that's, for me, being a really healthy thing to do. You go to the gym regularly, and for me it's like going to the gym for your mind. But the one thing that I would really struggle with was I was filming TV shows, I was hosting festivals, hosting Wembley, and you would always be on this massive high, but then as soon as you step away from that, it was that realisation as to, well, what am I away from that? Because people would know me from Jonty off the telly or Jonty off the radio, or whoever it may be. I would then come home and I would really struggle with just day-to-day life. And I think when I would try and explain that to people who perhaps didn't understand my level of normal, it would be, well, there's bigger issues. Of course there's bigger issues, but your normal is your normal. And
Absolutely.
That's a really important thing for people to understand, whether you're scoring goals at the weekend, whether you're working in a store at the weekend, whatever is important to you should be valued and should be discussed.
I think, you hit the nail on the head there. You said that, I have no shame in the sense that I'm going to see a therapist. But I guess if you were seeing a personal trainer, you wouldn't even prefix that with I have no shame, What I always think is, mental health is everyone's got mental health, and it's on a spectrum. So in the same way as we have to look after our physical health, it's really important to look after our mental health. And mental health isn't just the absence of disease, in the same way as physical health isn't just, well, I haven't got cancer, or I haven't got this or whatever. It is something that we have to actively look after in the same way as we would go to the gym to look after our physical health. So in terms of well-being, things like connection, making sure that you are spending time with family, with friends, and doing the things that are important to you, looking at what your values are and how far away have we moved away from those if we're doing all these other pursuits that maybe aren't as good for our mental health and well-being. Now, mental illness is something different. It's this is when basically the machine that is our brain just isn't working properly. It's a malfunction, essentially. And that is when we might need an intervention and we might need some support. And actually, that is indiscriminate. So it doesn't matter whether you're a big CEO of a company or whether you're a teacher, whether you're a cleaner, it doesn't matter what job you do, who you are. So at some point we will have an issue with our mental health, and it's important that when we notice that maybe we're not feeling the same way, we're not thinking the way we normally do, we're not behaving the way we normally do, that we reach out and seek support.
Another phrase I always pick up on is, "You're so brave." You're so brave by talking about it. And that always just triggers something in my mind that suggests, if you're considering me to be brave, then that stigma still remains.
Yeah.
And that stigma still remains across the board, right?
Absolutely. And I think this kind of, particularly, with men and with male-dominated sports like football, as it has been. So you've got I guess, stereotypes that are attached to both of those things. So you've got that side that says, well, actually, I'm a man, I need to be strong. And if you look at the way boys are socialised from a child, if a little boy falls over, come on, get up, you're all right. If it's a little girl,
Man up,
I'll give you a little hug,
yeah.
and so it's very, very different in the way we bring up males and females. But some cultures and some religions and faiths have different ideas as well around what is acceptable in terms of seeking support and seeking out professionals or professional help. And that's something actually that we are looking at as part of the wellbeing team as well, as looking at what are the barriers to reaching out for help. What is it that we need to put in place so that we are more approachable, I guess, and that psychology, counselling, those sorts of things aren't seen as something that we try to avoid. Because it's important that we are supporting people appropriately, but also making that confidential, safe space for them, I guess.
Yvie, I think one of the biggest things in my journey has been about finding out more about yourself and slowly becoming more self-aware. And if you hyper-focus on certain issues, you can take a step back. You can realise that you are so much more as an individual. There's so much more that creates each and every single one of us. A lot of people look at footballers and think they're just a footballer. That's the only thing that matters. That's the only thing that gives them identity. That's the only thing that makes them who they are. But as ever, they will have trials, tribulations, things that give them highs, things that give them lows. The PFA, as it stands, your wellbeing team, you offer so much. We've already talked about the pre-season camp. You have a wellbeing hotline. But how many individuals do you find actually taking up those services from you currently?
So our team have been out, and they've been out to all of the clubs across the leagues, and that we've had 1,500 wellbeing assessments done. So essentially what we do is when we get to a club is we'll get the players to scan a very confidential QR code, which takes them into a survey, and only we can see that. That's not fed back to clubs, and they trust us that information is staying within the PFA. Obviously, if there's a safeguarding issue or a high risk issue such as suicide ideation, those types of things, then we have to inform clubs, and we do get a few of them, to be fair. But then they translate either in wellbeing calls, which our team will personally do. The member that's gone in to see the club will make sure that personally every single one of those wellbeing issues are followed up. If those issues extend beyond their scope of practice, that will then be referred out. At the moment that goes to our Sport and Chance Clinic, and they have had 242 referrals in the last sort of half of the season, which is a lot of referrals, and 126 of those are brand new referrals, so that they're people who've not been into counselling or any kind of psychology intervention before, which is great, because it's not great that obviously we've got a lot of numbers, but on the flip side of that, it means more people are probably reaching out for support.
And what are those referrals based upon? What are the issues that people tend to be struggling with, if you don't mind?
Yeah, anxiety tends to be a big one, and I suppose, like I was saying earlier, that we're not quite sure whether that's performance anxiety alone or whether that's a generalised anxiety, and the two are very different. So that's something we're trying to get under the skin of. So whilst we've got the data, the broad data, we really want to look beneath that and try and see, okay, well, what type of anxiety are we dealing with, and what are we looking at there? And addiction issues like gambling tend to be high. Is that just coping mechanisms, do you think? Most likely, yeah, most likely it's a coping mechanism. Sometimes from the younger years. Maybe they've been injured and they're not experiencing the highs that they once were, or maybe they're not the player that they once were for whatever reason, and they turn to some of those unhealthy coping mechanisms to feel that high again. Because I guess when you're looking at elite players and elite performers, elite athletes in general, they're not like all of us. They don't think like we do. That's what makes them great. But it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because that's also what would turn into that sort of not getting those highs and that need and drive for success that they have. They're not getting that. Then on the flip side of that comes into control. And control might be, well, I'm going to control the way I feel by numbing it. I might numb it with some kind of substance, or I might start some kind of disordered eating because I'm controlling my eating because that feels nice to me. I feel like I'm in control of something. So yeah, it can be just because they are going through a tough time generally.
Is that something? I mean, just the thought of that is quite powerful as to how individuals, regardless of whether you're a footballer, regardless of role, is to create peace in uncertainty in some respects, because if peace lives in control, so often you're going to be without peace because there is so much within your life that is out of your control, whether it be injuries, whether it be results around you, whether it be performance based. There's so much that people in some respects have to let go of in a way, and it's about that development of finding that peace in knowing who you are, that self-awareness in those uncertain moments. But to do that when, as you say, you were an elite athlete, when you're so used to being in control, must be so difficult.
Yeah, really difficult. And don't forget as well, a lot of people going into first teams younger and younger, aren't they? And a lot of them haven't even formed their own identity as who they are as a person. And my philosophy's always been person first, athlete second, and trying to understand them as a person. And if you're being thrown into, I guess, fame, as it were, and stadiums full of people and that sort of thing at a really young age, and then all of a sudden you're not, you haven't experienced identity in any other way, and it's really difficult then to kind of manage that. And so that's where some of these maladaptive coping mechanisms originate from.
And it is where you and your team find great practice. I mean, just being around what you guys have done previously, what you guys do, the offering now that players get from the PFA is quite frankly all encompassing. How proud are you? And I know you're into this role in the very early stages and there is so much work to be done and you will always want to continue to grow, but when you look around and see what you were able to do, the difference you were able to make, that must make you incredibly proud of both yourself, your team, the wider organisation.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the wider organisation, the amount of skill, talent, care that the wider organisation has, it's not just wellbeing, there's other areas that feed into wellbeing. It's a multidisciplinary team essentially on a large scale. There's player services who will go into clubs and identify what it is players need, and they almost act as a sort of signpost to different departments. And there's always somebody in from player services. You'll always see somebody in from the PFA, and we all link up, and we are all always speaking to each other. So in that respect, it does feel like players are looked after. The other side of things, and there's always somebody in from player services. You'll always see somebody in from the PFA, and we all link up, and we are all always speaking to each other. So in that respect, it does feel like players are looked after. The other side of things is we are always looking to develop research that informs practice. So when we get the surveys back and we learn from a season that maybe addiction is a big thing, for example, out in the clubs.
I did just want to get your opinion on one final thing. Obviously, football as a whole was struck by the loss of Diogo Jota and his brother Andre at the start of the season. You talk about grief in so many ways, and we can grieve relationships, we can grieve ourselves in the identity, which we talk about so often. You talk about a group of players that are still having to continue their job on a day-by-day basis with, I know it's obviously a club close to your heart as well. with a massive part missing.
Yeah.
Footballers aren't, I mean, they can be perceived to be in some respects, but they're not superhuman, and they're not immune to emotion, if you like. How big a part will losing Diogo, losing their teammate, losing their friend, how big is that to impact a season? Even for me to go to work and lose a colleague, you see reminders of them every single day.
Absolutely.
And that pain must be so repetitive and so intense to have to deal with.
Yeah, and the thing is with grief is people deal with grief in different ways. And you know, some people very overtly express their grief, and some people don't know how to feel. They can't even label the emotion. They might just feel numb, and it might be more of a physiological feeling. Like I've got stomach pains. I just feel a pain in my chest. I don't feel quite right. And I think sometimes, I mean, I say to people is, don't wait until you feel bad enough to reach out for help. It can just be like a slight change in something, and it might just be, I don't know what it is. I don't even know what I feel. I just don't feel like me. And that's the time that, you know, really you should reach out, because working with a therapist or just talking to somebody like in our wellbeing team, or you know, even your own club psychologist, whatever, really helps you just to sort of try and make sense of that. But it's huge, you know, grief, like I say, it hits us in lots of different ways, and you know, it's not just our brain, it's our body as well. And you know, so performance wise, you know, you are more susceptible to injury and those sorts of things when your mind's not right. So it's the same, you can't separate the body and the mind, they are inextricably linked.
And just finally, obviously,
wise, you know, you are more susceptible to injury and those sorts of things when your mind's not right. So it's the same, you can't separate the body and the mind, they are inextricably linked.
And just finally, obviously, this series is produced as part of Men's Mental Health Month. If there was one underlying...
Just not being afraid to reach out and seek support, really. It's very simple. But also, you know, making sure that your identity isn't just wrapped up in football, that you do explore other areas. I think that's because that is the crux, really. When you transition out of football, when we talk to our past members or past players, you know, that transition out is really difficult if you don't have anything else other than football.
Brilliant. Yvie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you
so much for
Thanks
coming
very
down.
Much. Thank you.